Hi, everyone. I'm really excited about today because we've got a special guest with us, Andrew Campbell, who is a clinical psychologist in America, a registered psychologist in Australia, and also chairs the Research Centre of Cyberpsychology at the University of Sydney. Is that right?
That's correct.
There's a few things that you're very consumed in, but main point being the specialization is really around psychology and cyber psychology. So we're going to get into that a little bit later, but to start off with, we wanted to talk about today stress, and stress is specifically around relationships and certain elements of that which are beyond our control, and then certain elements of those events and incidents that happen in our life that we can control, like communication. So if we narrow it down further and go right into it, we're talking about today communication and how to improve our relationships and then our stress responses when we're working through improving our communication. So just broadly, let's just start with, what are you seeing in terms of like presentations and how people are coming to you in relation to stress, specifically within relationships?
Specifically within relationships, the number one thing is communication, being able to get across not just your intent of what you want the person to understand, but how they could react to help you cope with the stress you've got. So it's a case of here's what I'm feeling and here's what I need. So those two main points in communication in relationships. And then the other part is actually juggling priorities, getting people to empathize with why they're under stress. They might be busy mums and dads running corporate jobs, doing many different errands, and also running other people's teams and things like that. So if they've got other responsibilities beyond themselves and beyond their relationship, that's quite a lot to juggle and quite a lot to prioritize. So the communication around that and understanding where the stress points are on the communication, that's the hard part to unravel.
So this is both in the workplace as well as within family dynamics, right?
Absolutely. So the early part of my career, I did a lot of family counselling, and it was mostly to do with communication problems, particularly for new parents, but also I've done some marriage counselling as well. Today, the current stuff I do is a lot about how do we work better in work environments and minimise our stress in those work environments by improving our communication. The
things around this is that it's a spiral that you get into, because if you have tension with one relationship, generally, depending on sort of, I guess, even the triangle, right? The triangle of chaos. I think it's something around the drama triangle.
So when we look at that model, we're sort of looking at I need, I want, and those two are actually fighting each other. Sometimes we don't know what we need, but we want a response quickly. We want somebody to validate our feelings. We want to feel less stress, but we don't know how to get there. And we put a lot of emphasis on the partner or whomever you trust, your confidant, to figure it out without giving them much tools. And that in turn gives them stress.
Let's look at the drama triangle, right, as one sort of way of how we represent ourselves in relationships, because I like the analogy of the coach, the rescuer, the victim.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting because if we play, say, for example, a rescuer in one relationship, that's work or family, sometimes is it true that we end up then becoming resentful and playing victim in another relationship? So, I mean, you can see how important then it becomes to manage our communication in every interaction and relationship, because it could flow on and have these detrimental impacts on other relationships.
Absolutely. And one of the things we quite commonly see is that in our professional environments, we can't necessarily put pushback or overemphasis on your need, because you might be in a subordinate relationship or a collaborative relationship where you don't want to damage the fabric of that relationship. So you then bring that home. And when you bring it home, that might be the unloading onto your partner. And they've got the same problem probably in their workplace. And so that drama, as you mentioned, a part of the triangle starts to flare up because you're both relying on your partner to take the stress away because of the love and trust that you have with each other. And that's very hard to sort of estimate when's the right time to say I need versus you need. How do you negotiate that? And that's where the communication skills really come in, both from how to explain your stress and how to actually sort of understand that now's the time to release it with your partner, now's not the time, and here's what they need and here's what you need, and so on. Yeah.
And for those people that don't know what the drama triangle is and how we can use some of those, I guess, labels to describe the persona that we're playing or the role that we're playing in that relationship, can you tell us a little bit about the three roles and the drama triangle?
So the drama triangle, really, from the rescuer part, is that you are putting yourself into the relationship all the time to be the fixer. If you're looking at yourself as being the person that honestly is putting everything in all the time, you're going to need to take from somewhere else. That's the main thing. Could you list the other two very quickly? Because I have to be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've done the drama triangle.
So we've got the rescuer, we've got the victim.
The victim, that's right. So
and then we've got the coach, and the healthiest persona to play is really the coach.
Yeah, look, from the victim side of things, just very quickly, and that's really where a lot of solution-focused psychology comes from, is where we look at empowering the person to actually problem solve in certain steps. And so that's why I think from your reading of the drama triangle, it's something that I admit I haven't used that particular model in a long, long time, but it is a very good model. It is a really good model. The victim is really the person that needs the skills basis of the communication and the understanding of what they're putting out there to what they're going to get back. The rescuer is the person that overextends themselves. And if we look at the coach is the one that actually try to look at, how do we, if you will, it's like a referee, kind of looking at how do you balance those needs and wants between the two parties. But at the same time, it's about empowering yourself as the coach, looking inward as well as outward. So I think it's fantastic that you brought that up. The drama model is a really good one. The truth of the matter is it's a flexible model too. You'll find that the coach, the victim, and the rescuer, you keep swapping roles. You're never just one.
Absolutely. And so let's now look at, okay, so we're in a workplace, we've got an overbearing manager. How do you manage that relationship where you've got just a difficult manager that you've got to deal with? So you don't fall into, say, that victim or that feeling sorry for yourself.
Absolutely. Look, this is where I'd honestly say the simple step is words matter. One of the things we tend to do when we're feeling victimized or we feel like we need to be rescued is we either lash out and use harsh words or defensive words, or we can use words of I'm not coping, and which you probably genuinely feel. I'm not saying that a person wouldn't feel that at all, but when you say that, it gives the manager a decision pathway in their mind. If you're saying you're not coping, the manager's skill set is, well, why are you not coping? What do you need? And you may not know, and you may not have the language or even the courage to say, actually, it's the way you've been talking to me, or it's the way you've been putting demands on me. If you are defensive, if you're saying, I don't like this, stop it, what you really need to do is also remember that that person's going to have a reaction. They're going to be feeling quite intensely about the way you speak to them or the way you write to them through emails. So it's really important to always offer a solution, whether you say, I'm not feeling good in the workplace because, but it would get better if, and then you could explain what you need. Always sort of think of what's the balance that you can give to a conversation. That way you remove accusation and you also highlight the problem and you put forward something that you know that will physically and mentally alleviate some pressure and hopefully open the dialogue to a better conversation of how can we do this. And I'll just finish by saying the easiest way to do this sometimes is to say, I can't imagine the stress that you're under as a manager, but I'd like to tell you about what I'm experiencing right now that I'm hoping you can help me with. And that way it identifies that they too are under stress. They may never have mentioned it, but it gives them respect that you're not thinking they're in a privileged position, that they've got their own problems. You've identified, you've given sympathy, and now you're asking them to listen to you. So it's sort of an offering of, can we share our problems to a degree, but I need your help as my line manager.
So to summarize that's such an excellent, I think, way to frame communication in a conversation. And we went into a specific example of a difficult or just challenging manager. The framework I kind of heard was you first offer a level of empathy and understanding to their perspective, and then you offer what you are experiencing, and then a potential alternative or solution, but definitely have that solution so they also aren't at loss at the options.
Exactly. More often, if we were to role play it very briefly, if somebody said, look, stop giving me so much work, and that was the opening statement, the person would be like, well, hold on a sec, where's this coming from, and why are you saying that you're getting so much work? And so you see immediately from that, there's a role play of defensiveness. Where if you came, you said, I understand you're under a lot of stress right now. May I have some of your time? Because I have a problem I'd like to discuss with you. So that is a passive but assertive way. And when I say a passive assertive, it means that you're going, I see you're busy. I see you've got stress. However, I also need you to hear me. And that way you're putting yourself in a situation where they can go, all right, now I've got to be honest with you, this can backfire, this little bit can backfire a little bit, where if you don't say, I need your time now, or I need your time at a later point, that person could defer you and go, you're not important right now. I've got other things going on. So really being clear of how urgent the situation is without trying to be dramatic is really important. Like, I'm having some problems that's affecting my work performance, or I'm having some problems that are affecting me emotionally at work. Using those keywords, performance and emotion, are things that a manager should be able to go, okay, that's important. I need to listen to that. So keywords in your statements is very, very important.
Andrew, as you're speaking, one of the things that really comes to me is that for someone to be so clear in their communication and so deliberate as well in terms of the outcome that they're trying to achieve, they need to be in a good headspace. And most of the time what we're finding is that people are not in a good headspace because they're already at the point of burnout. So my question is, what are some things that people can do practically day to day or week on week that actually ground them, center them, so they are in a good headspace to then bring forward this level of sophisticated communication?
Really good question. And you're absolutely spot on when it comes down to when we're in that panic mode or we're in that stress mode, we don't have the clear mind or language to use. And so you're absolutely right. The first thing you should really do, and I do this in first mental health first aid courses, is, let's say it's an email and your email has triggered a response. Do not respond. Really wait for a good period of time. If we then move to the next stage of how to de-escalate from something that's triggered you, and we're using email as this response here, you must remember that your life is not where you are right now. Your life is made up of many different things, and this happens to be one situation that's triggering a negative response right now. Thinking of home, thinking of your hobbies, thinking of your loved ones, thinking of what you're doing after work, thinking of what you're doing this weekend, putting yourself in a headspace, knowing that there are other times in your life, past and present and future, that are going to be different to what you're experiencing right now. As you get back into that headspace of, right, I'm not basically blinkered and feeling like the walls are closing in and this is all I have to deal with, you can then get to that point of, what would make, and it's literally a case of asking a question to yourself, what would make my perception of this situation feel so bad? The history is usually the biggest answer. People feel like this has happened before, and therefore they don't know how to solve it. And that's why they get really, really ramped up, because they don't have a steam valve that's dealt with it earlier on. So one of the things you might do is think, what's a brand new way I can communicate with the person that's just upset me? And it's definitely not the usual, which is a knee-jerk reaction of a nasty response. A nasty response will always start a chain reaction of nasty responses, unfortunately. If it's a case of ignore, so the fight or flight response, the fight would be the nasty response, the flight would be, I'll just deal with it, it's not that bad, it'll get better, and I'll pretend nothing will change, pretend everything will change by not dealing with it. Unfortunately, that's going to make your next response down the track much, much worse. So the third option, apart from fight or flight, is to actually think, what's new? What's something I can do that I haven't done before? And more often than not, it's the social response. The person you're dealing with outside of work, just like you, is a different person. They have their own life, they have their own interests, their own family, and so on. So maybe it might be a case of, at the end of the day, asking them, would you mind if there's a day in the week where I could meet you for 5 or 10 minutes for a coffee, where I can buy you a coffee, or something that allows a social interaction rather than a non-personal interaction through email. And that gives the headspace for that person to go, this person's making an effort. You know, this person is genuinely coming to talk to me, and that's out of the blue. This has never happened before. I should listen. So that little change in behavior is often what managers suddenly notice and go, this is not the regular. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. It's not an ignorance. It's straight up, they need to talk. It's a meaningful conversation.
And I think one of the other things that just comes to mind is that we underestimate that no one enjoys conflict.
No.
None of us are built for confrontational conversations. We're all inherently built to avoid, and it is a skill that over time we need to develop. And just thinking back on my 15 years of leadership, the amount of role plays that I did in the formative years to build up on the ability to have those conversations confrontationally. Great takeaways here, like words matter, wait and just pause. And then because we are human beings which are inherently built for patterns, break the pattern by asking yourself, what's new that I could do to break this pattern? And then just on that, don't underestimate the process. Like maybe even role play it, write it down.
That's right. Role play it. Talk with partners, talk with loved ones. We all want to vent about a bad day at work. You know, I don't think there's a single person in this world that hasn't had a bad day at work. And what do? If you reflect back on that bad day or any bad day, what do? You've talked to your friends, you've talked to your family, you've had some time of self-care, you've done something to just reflect. That allows the brain to slow down and role play a little bit with different options. Now, clearly, there could be some toxic relationships in the workplace, and these need to be addressed accordingly. But if we're talking about all of you are under pressure and you've all got different priorities, sometimes a very simple conversation of how can I help you to help me can be the start of how to actually get that pressure off everybody's shoulders, the manager, yourself, the team. And then it's a way of, right, let's get on the same page and move forward. Because ultimately, when we look at businesses in the workplace, they have an objective. The problem is that sometimes not everybody sees that objective or they don't understand the objective. Once we do and we really go, right, I'm doing this because I need this done, but you need this done. How do we make that work together? We've got a roadblock that's removed. The workplace becomes slightly better to work with. And you start feeling as though I also have achieved a new goal that I never ever thought of. I now have been able to have a successful conversation with my line manager and felt like I can do it again if I need to. That trust building in the workplace is absolutely essential to good mental health going forward. So good communication, solving a problem leads to further avenues of better conversation down the path and the joy of actually reforming a team at work that you can actually work with.
I like to summarize this by how can I help you to help me?
That's right.
What an interesting perspective, because after all, we live in a world of multiple perspectives.
Absolutely. And we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, and everyone's reality is so different and so unique that it's almost like I'll come to your world to understand where you're at and then build the trust from that level of empathy and that foundation of empathy.
Absolutely. And just to be fair too, where I work at the University of Sydney, I've been very privileged to have a long career there now. It's just going on nearly 24 years. And so I'm privy to a lot of the very top level conversations. And I look at the leaders that have got there, and they're amazing people, very accomplished. They've got families. They've done everything hard, just like everybody else has. The thing is I think we also get entrenched in what we do. And so once in a while, I like to ask my colleagues that I work with at my level is, let's go and look at what the others are doing at the lines we did 20 years ago to get an understanding of their perspective. So really understanding others' roles is so important to unblocking those potential pathways that can lead to stress. And then empathy builds. And to be honest, celebrations go up because you really see how people are working together, even though we don't talk about it sometimes. It's not something you talk about every day of like, what did you achieve? It's really a case of how was your day? That's the question we ask. And often people go, well, you don't want to hear that. You're just being nice. And they keep it to themselves. But seeing it sometimes, experiencing it is a wonderful way to actually then build empathy, team cohesion, and actually be open to those at a more subordinate level coming to you with their problems. So building that trust.
Yes, absolutely. What a great note to end our session today, Andrew. So appreciate your time. I know you're being pulled in different directions and working on some incredible things. I think we will extend this conversation on another podcast one day where we touch on AI and mental health and your perspectives on that.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much for having me, Esha.